Good evening. You ready to get started, Anthony?
Sure, why not? Good evening. Welcome to the fifth, I think, meeting of the this MSK Pavilion Task Force. The purpose of our meeting tonight is to discuss and vote on a resolution that will, I guess the best way to describe it is will summarize this task force's views of and observations based on the presentations and discussions of the previous four meetings. So I'm not sure if there are some special words from MSK that we're looking for, or if we're just going to start right in.
I'll go ahead and unmute them. You can confirm
Okay.
unmuting on your end, Memorial Sloan Kettering. There you go.
Good evening, Anthony, and everybody. In my discussions with Will, we were asked to provide a summation to bring together what we thought were our critical points, and that's how we're prepared to proceed. If that's still your...
Please.
Okay. I can have the first slide. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, they have to allow us to share.
We need you to share our screen, to allow us to share our screen.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to join you all again to discuss the Memorial Sloan Kettering Pavilion project. As most of you have heard before, my name is Jeff Drebin, and I'm the chair of the Department of Surgery and acting hospital president at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where I oversee our world-class faculty delivering the very best cancer care. Next slide, please. Over the past few months, through our series of task force meetings, we've had the opportunity to take a deeper dive into numerous aspects of the Pavilion project. In our time together, we've discussed everything from the need for the patient bridge, the ins and outs of the environmental review process, to sustainability, housing, traffic, and transportation. Most recently, we had the opportunity to discuss the measures that will be put in place to minimize the impact of construction on our neighbors and our patients. Through these meetings, we've heard many of your concerns, and I want to personally assure you that we're committed to working with you, our neighbors, as we move forward with the land use process. I hope we've also been able to convey the enduring commitment we have to our mission and to the community, and how the Pavilion will allow the doctors, nurses, and caregivers here at Memorial Sloan Kettering to treat the tsunami of cancer patients we know are coming right here to our doorsteps in New York City. That is how we give back to you, by providing life-saving cancer treatment to New Yorkers across our city and ensuring we can grow as an institution to adapt to the cancer care challenges of the future. Tonight, I'm joined by Shelley Friedman, our land use counsel, and my MSK colleague, Roger McLean, Director, Design and Construction and Facilities Management. Shelley will first provide a brief overview of the land use process, a process I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with, and then I will briefly hand this over to Roger. Shelley.
Thank you, Dr. Drebin, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to, in as much as it's going to return to the community board as a ULURP application, asking for specific zoning actions at some point, I thought it would be useful on our last evening to just summarize for you very briefly what those zoning actions are, and to be able to respond to any further questions you may have. The first action that we're seeking is a zoning map amendment to rezone the Rockefeller Lab site and a portion of the Pavilion site from R8 to R9. This is a resubmission of our 2001 application, which we voluntarily withdrew with regard to the Rockefeller Lab site for reasons which I described at our earlier meeting, and I don't feel the need to go into unless you wish to hear it again. But we are in fact returning with the same application at this point by invitation to complete the upzoning of the Memorial Sloan Kettering large-scale campus to uniform R9. Secondly, we are pursuing a certification to permit more than one curb cut on a narrow street. As you've seen, we have a drive-through that we would like to initiate to reduce on-street traffic for our arrivals and departures. And we would like to bring our loading bays off of 67th Street and around 66th Street, excuse me, and around to 67th Street. If you agree that those are good aims of this project, then we're going to need support for a certification to locate more than one curb cut on along our East 67th Street facade. So that is that request. Third, this is a group of land use actions that all fall under the 2001 large-scale community facility designation. I should say that large scales these are not major zoning actions in that they are not citywide, they're not even community board wide. The community facility large-scale designation is a very concentrated part of the zoning resolution, which applies only to community facilities, and in some places only to hospitals, and in some places only to hospitals and community boards 8 and 12, where there are large-scale community facility designations. So there's no citywide implications here on these actions, and there's no wide community board implications of these actions. They all are provided to large scales such as ours, approved in 2001, to move floor area and distribute bulk around a multi-campus site. The only other community facility large scale that I'm aware of is New York Presbyterian, New York Hospitals, on the east side of York along the river. What they have built on the west side of York is not part of the large scale. So this is a very unique and focused set of zoning actions that will not have a wide implications. The first is a text amendment to the large scale text to allow by special permit modifications of lot coverage and signage. We need a lot coverage waiver because our site, because we're in an effort to build our full lot, which has the additional implication of bringing height down. We are seeking to be able to increase the lot coverage on the site currently from approximately 56% to about 72%. The signage text amendment will permit us a very limited foray into increasing the amount of navigational signage that we believe is necessary here. MSK's large scale is unique in that it is on the city grid. Every building entrance is on an avenue or a side street, and we have many of them, and we have many loading bays, and we want to be able to make sure that pedestrians, patients, visitors, arriving, departing liveries and trucks all know where they need to get to in the shortest amount of time and with the least bit of confusion. We're also asking within large scales, so once again, limited to Community Board 8 and hospitals within Community Board 8, an opportunity to build 2 illuminated kiosks. These kiosks will be inside our property line, not on the sidewalk, to again allow for better navigation and to allow for greater comfort to those arriving to understand where they're going in a very complex series of city blocks. The second action is a modification to adjust the 2001 floor area calculations. We're not creating new floor area except for the upzoning, but we are redistributing it. There is currently 200,000 square feet of unused zoning floor area available to us as of right, literally for development on the main block, and that will be transferred to the Pavilion site. At the end of the day, this will be a large scale that has totally exhausted its allocation of zoning floor area and will be totally maxed out at 10 FAR, which, as you know, is high density FAR, but it's certainly less than the 12, 13, and 14 FAR buildings that you've seen come up in Community Board 8 in other respects. We will, with the text amendment, be pursuing the special permits to modify height, setback, lot coverage, and signage. Height and setback are required because there are setbacks at various heights of our building. And we hope that you will recall our presentation regarding the minimum size of the OR platforms and the best practices size of our patient floors, which will require that we have those setbacks waived, as you've seen with the other hospitals, so that we will have the same footprint from the first floor to the top floor. The top floor through these waivers, again, as you will recall, we are proceeding to get a zoning envelope rather than a particular building approved. We can build within that zoning envelope. That zoning envelope will top out at 594 feet above grade. That is not the height of our building per se. We currently believe that our building will be around 574 feet, but we will need additional mechanical space above that. And that is why we want to be totally transparent with you and tell you that while it's frequently, the height of the building is frequently referred to as the top occupied floor, we need to go further with our mechanical space. The total building will top out at 594. We have a series of also large scale modifications to height and setback. These are very technical. The large scale text treats a building on the perimeter of the large scale differently than on the interior of the large scale. East 67th Street is an interior elevation. York and East 66th Street are perimeter elevations. And so different rules apply, and this covers all the rules we'll need for a waiver of height and setback. Finally, there are a number of drawings and charts and tables in the 2001 approval that'll have to be updated by virtue of this application. And then finally, not a zoning action, but an action pursued at New York City Department of Transportation. The two-story bridge that we are proposing requires a revocable consent. Last week, we showed you that the city of New York has provided a number of bridges over public streets to hospitals via a revocable consent. And while somewhat unique to your experience, this is in every way typical of the bridges that hospitals have been provided since 1907 in the city of New York over public streets to connect hospital buildings. So that is the summary of the actions. That's what will be on your collective plate when we come back to you in Euler. And I just wanted to begin the evening by reminding you of those actions as you consider your recommendations and resolution. I'm going to turn it over now to Roger McLean from the facilities to discuss certain aspects of the presentation that his area of expertise is covered. Roger.
Thank you, Shelley. And also thank you to the Community Board 8 for having us this evening. On behalf of MSK, the Facilities Management Group, I just wanted to reiterate not only thanking the team, the Community Board for working with us so far in these early task force, but also moving forward into our construction working group and really working together with this team as we get through every aspect of the project, every aspect of the process. Your dedication to this community is evident and well respected by us here at this organization. And I think on top of that, when it comes to that working group and that construction working group, we want to focus on transparent communication. We want to be active listeners to hear your concerns, listen to some of the issues that may arise during construction, and respond accordingly. So we want to offer that commitment and be true to that commitment, that as we get into further processes within our development, that we're working with you as a team, we're transparently communicating, we're listening as active listeners, listening to the concerns, and then making sure that we respond the way that supports the project, that supports the community, and make sure that we're working together. So I just wanted to take a brief moment to reiterate those points.
Thank you, Roger. With tonight being our final presentation, I wanted to once more underscore the avalanche of cancer cases that we're preparing for, as well as offer some additional context on these figures. By 2050, we're predicting that cancer rates will rise by 50%, and that 1 in 3, and some projections even go to 1 in 2, people will have cancer in their lifetimes. It's estimated there'll be 40,000 new cases this year in New York City, 47,000 by 2030, and 60,000 by 2050. And this chart that is here shows the age groups of cancer in 2015 in the light blue, and in 2050 in estimates in the darker blue. And what you can see is cancer will go up in every age bracket, but particularly for patients who are over 65, the rates will continue to climb. Cancer is a disease of aging, and more cancer cases are seen as populations get older. Now, this is what we're up against, and this is why we need the pavilion. At our last meeting, a question on the accuracy of these predictions was raised by a community member, and I'm glad it was raised. It's an important one, and one I wanted to make sure I addressed. We take data and science very seriously at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and in this spirit, I wanted to provide some additional context that cements our belief in the accuracy of the cancer projections we have been discussing these last few weeks. This figure is from the National Cancer Institute. The prior data was from the CDC, and represents a projection for increasing cancer occurrence that was made in 2002, as you can see from the blue circle. This was published in May 2002. And at that time, 20 years ago, it was predicted that there would be roughly 1.8 million cases of cancer in 2020. Next slide, please. In fact, the actual cancer case number in 2020, according to this publication, was 1.806 million cases. Strikingly accurate. And if you look at this slide carefully, you'll notice that they projected even back then that there would be a 50% increase between 2020 and 2050, going again from 1.8 million to 2.7 million. The unfortunate reality is cancer incidence projections have been strikingly accurate, and we believe the predictions from the CDC and the National Cancer Institute will continue to follow suit. While we work to advance cancer care with the hope that these numbers will not come to fruition, our plan can't be predicated on hope. Our plan for the future must be grounded in the best information we have access to for the New Yorkers we know will be coming to us for life-saving care. Next slide. As we've made clear, the rising incidence of cancer itself is only part of the puzzle we're trying to solve. The complexity and acuity of the cancer cases will require more technologically advanced interventions. Treatments and technology the Memorial Hospital in its current state is just not able to accommodate. Just in the past 20 years, we've seen the advent of surgical robots, MRI neurosurgical suites, biplanar CT angiography surgical ORs, and that technology will continue to advance. Through our series of meetings, I hope that we've been able to emphasize how the pavilion is designed specifically to address the dual concerns of the increasing number of cancer cases and the complexity of cancer. Complexity of cancer treatment, which we'll be delivering. It's also important to recognize the pavilion is not a standalone hospital. The design of the building and the accompanying patient bridge will ensure total integration with Memorial Hospital, guaranteeing the highest quality of care and safety for our patients. Secondly, the structure of the building is specifically designed to house 200 patient beds and 28 operating rooms. That is the magic ratio for our programmatic needs. Throughout our meetings together, we've had to contend with the question, what happens if you don't get the height variances? In the simplest terms, a smaller pavilion means fewer beds and fewer operating rooms, which means less capacity to meet demand and perform life-saving procedures. In this scenario, New Yorkers will be unable to get treatment when they need it. We'll be forced to make patients wait for care at a time when the worry of treatment availability should be the last thing on their minds. While those with resources may be able to fly to Boston or Houston or Philadelphia to receive cutting-edge cancer care at a leading cancer center, New Yorkers will have a harder time. That is the frightening reality that we're working to change. As we've mentioned in recent years, we've made a conscious effort to expand our care to all our surrounding neighbors, whether they're a lawyer, school teacher, or school janitor. Through our advocacy efforts and the passage of the Network Access Bill in Albany, we have worked to ensure that Medicaid and Medicare managed care patients can come to Memorial Sloan Kettering, and members of most such plans now have access to our care. We believe it is our duty to continue to offer the best possible cancer care to our patients and the broader community. We do this through technology, innovation, and delivering life-saving treatments that ensure that the patients we treat have the best outcomes in the nation. As I've discussed in a previous call, stage for stage, patients are substantially more likely to survive their cancer diagnosis when treated at Memorial Sloan Kettering. At the risk of sounding repetitive, we need to construct this new pavilion, and we need to get it done as quickly as possible to meet the rising need for more advanced cancer care among the increasing number of New Yorkers who will be diagnosed each year. We're committed to working with you to ensure that we can meet this demand in a way that integrates this new building into the community, which we are honored to be a part of. Thank you to Community Board 8 and the Zoning and Development Committee and the board members who gave us their time and thoughtful consideration over these many nights. Anthony Cohn, Felice Farber, Russell Squire, Will Brightbill, Bill Angelos, Elizabeth Ashby, Gail Barron, Michelle Birnbaum, Lorraine Brown, Alita Camp, Ed Hartzog, Sahar Hussein, Craig Lader, Valerie Mason, John McClement, Elizabeth Rose, Barbara Rudder, Judy Schneider, Marco Tamayo, Adam Wald, and Sherry Weiner. And if I've left anyone out, we're grateful to you too. I want to turn this back to Anthony now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much. It was actually an extremely clear summation of what it is that you want to do and why. I guess, Felice, well, let me ask it a different way. Have people, committee members, seen the draft resolution? Do we know?
It has been sent, it has been sent around. Whether people have had an opportunity to look at it, I don't know.
Okay, well, I wonder if, it seems as though reading it is sort of silly, but because it's long.
Well, maybe Will can share the screen and put it up.
Yeah.
And I guess if I could just add, this is a draft for discussion purposes. I thought it would make the conversation about what the resolution should be a little bit easier. And it's based on the comments that we received over the past 4 meetings. So I guess Will or whomever's managing this can put it up.
Yeah. Here we go. It was a very short turnaround and really many thanks to Felice for pulling it all together, actually.
So
Frantic
can you
afternoon.
enlarge it maybe?
It's got to be bigger so we can read it. Now, whoops, disappeared.
Just give me
I
one
wonder
second. I'm
if-
trying to zoom it in for you.
Oh, that's okay, no problem. just like all of our resolutions, the first thing, the first parts of it discuss those aspects of just sort of speak to describe the project, both for in terms of the actual application, and then also whatever details are currently available. So if we have looked at this, and have we? I don't see Judy on camera.
Judy, you can confirm a meeting.
Yeah. I just have a question before we start, Anthony and Felice. Mr. Friedman said something during his presentation that I didn't hear discussed during any of the meetings, so I'm not quite sure what he was talking about. He referred to an illuminated kiosk or kiosks. Could he please explain what he's talking about and where it goes, and what is this, a building? Is it, I think he referred to it as signage. I didn't quite understand what he was talking about.
Happy to. This has been part of the original, the original package, and it was evident on the site plan that you looked at, that we described in an earlier meeting. As you'll recall, the ground floor of this building is pinched in. The building itself from the fourth floor up is a full lot coverage building, but beneath that, there's going to be a smaller 2-floor lobby that is recessed. And the entrances to the hospital will be in that recessed area, and that area will be landscaped. There will be seating. It will be open. It will be open to the public. But because these entrances are recessed, there was a concern that arriving patients in particular, but visitors and others, would have a hard time finding their way into the building, especially since those arriving by vehicle are going to be using the drive-through, which is a drop-off in the interior of the lot, and is also not visible from the public way. So the idea was to build totally within our property line, not in the public space, 2 kiosks that would rise about under 20 feet high, but that those kiosks would have the lettering of MSK, and so that people could understand that they've arrived close to the doors, and it will lead them into the hospital. Because this is going to be a hospital, and there will be nighttime visitors and the like, and in late afternoons, we thought that those kiosks would be internally illuminated. And under the present zoning, that is not permitted in an R10 district. And so while there are other ways of providing lighting on signage, you can see it up and down the hospitals, we felt that the most subtle way to do it and the least intrusive was to internally illuminate these letters, so people would have an understanding of where the 2 entrance doors to the pavilion in the landscape recess would be located. That's the purpose. Those were on the drawings. We can, while you're going through this, I can dig out those drawings and put them up.
Not necessary. I just wasn't sure if you were, when you mentioned it, referring to signage, which basically you are, or you were
Yes.
talking about a kiosk as a small building.
No, it's a pylon. It's basically an
Okay, I
illuminated.
got it now. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, Felice, what do you think? How should we do this? Should we just read it?
I guess the question, maybe by a show of hands, if folks had an opportunity to review this. I guess we could read it. Russell's read it. Judy's seen a
Yeah,
version.
obviously
Mrs.
I've read
Brown.
it, yeah.
So some have.
All right. Okay, I'll go ahead. All right, let me ask another question of you, Felice. Do you think we can in fact skip to the now therefore be it resolved part?
Well, I think we can, if we can go up a little, I think we can skip through the first, whereas, so we can scroll up a little. We can, the first six,
Okay.
whereases,
Yeah.
or the first whereas is really just the zoning amendments that have been requested by MSK, and that's a restatement of it.
Felice, may I add a friendly word here?
Absolutely.
This is quite correct, given what we presented to the Zoning and Development Committee. But since then, city planning has added the curb cut certification that I discussed.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I will provide you that text. It's actually on the slide that I just presented, which you have. But you should take a look at item 2 on that slide, which has been added to the mix.
Okay, we will
Yes,
make that
we'll
amendment.
add that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. I think while absolutely necessary, the permission for curb cuts is the smallest piece, very smallest piece of this application. All right, so we'll skip the first 6, actually 7 items, and start with whereas the zoning actions. What?
I just, oh yeah, I just wanted to, I have a question because I'm not sure that this is correct. You're limiting 300 units of housing. 200 will be in replaced on Roosevelt Island, and I guess that we can talk about it as we get to it. And 100 units absorbed into existing facilities. Are those correct numbers?
I believe so.
Okay. All right, sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
No problem. Whereas the zoning actions are a continuation of the 2001 ULURP application that was partially approved with the remainder delayed as a result of 9/11 until MSK was ready to proceed with more defined plans. And whereas MSK is seeking the above referenced zoning changes to facilitate the construction of a new surgical center and clinical hospital building within the existing MSK campus large-scale community facility development at 1223 York Avenue. And whereas MSK is also seeking a revocable consent for a 2-story pedestrian sky bridge over East 67th Street, connecting the MSK Memorial Hospital building to the new pavilion, and where MSK plans to demolish MSK-owned housing at the Scholars and Sloan House that provides 300 units of housing, 200 of which will be replaced with units on Roosevelt Island, and the remaining 100 units will be absorbed into existing MSK facilities. And whereas the housing will be replaced with a new pavilion that will include 28 operating rooms and 200 patient rooms. And whereas the new pavilion will not house any doctor's offices or outpatient space, and whereas the height of the building envelope will be no more than 594 feet, and whereas operating room floors require 18-foot floor, actually it's floor to floor height, while patient floors require 15-foot floor-to-floor height, and whereas MSK has committed to constructing a new cancer pavilion that meets the highest standards of carbon neutrality possible, and whereas MSK has committed to constructing the building using union labor and will require union labor to be used for off-site fabrication, and whereas MSK has committed to implementing the highest levels of noise mitigation and dust control during construction, And now, therefore, be it resolved that Community Board 8M requests MSK incorporate the following recommendations in their zoning application and revocable consent application. And these are bullet points, so I won't say first. Replacement of the 300 units of housing with at least 200 units in Community District 8. A design that meets the needs of the hospital on a smaller size and density than currently proposed. That the new pavilion meet the highest standards of carbon neutrality possible as proposed by MSK. That MSK construct the building using union labor as proposed by MSK, that MSK require union labor to be used for off-site fabrication, that MSK design the building exterior with materials that do not reflect light into the surrounding community, including residences and parks, that MSK implement the highest levels of noise mitigation and dust control during construction, as proposed by MSK, that MSK ensure adequate lighting on its construction fencing to ensure a well-lit and safe community, that MSK install artwork on the construction fence to beautify the neighborhood during the 6-year construction duration, that MSK coordinate noise mitigation plans with PS 183 to minimize the impact of construction activities on the students at PS 183, that MSK maximize the use of greenery in the facility design and replace the greenery in front of the Schwartz building, that MSK work to mitigate the traffic backup at the parking garage, that MSK holds monthly meetings with the community during the course of construction to apprise the community of construction progress and next steps and receive feedback regarding any concerns. And that is where we are. And so I see people are lined up. And I guess we'll start with members of the public. And so first we have Laura Jackson. So if you could unmute her, that would be great.
Okay, hello. I'm Laura Jackson, been a resident of 66th Street for 31 years. I've attended every MSK task force meeting since May 4th and spoken about exist.
Laura, excuse me, Laura, your connection is breaking up a bit. I would suggest turning off your video and proceeding with reading your testimony.
Okay, will do. Hold on. I'm looking for, oh, here. Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I've attended every MSK task force meeting since May 4th and spoken about the traffic issues that currently exist due to MSK's parking garage. MSK's responses have failed to satisfy any concerns of how this massive expansion would deal with the exponential increase in traffic. To my knowledge, the question of how two massive bedrock blasting projects happening simultaneously just one block from each other might impact the stability of the surrounding buildings has not been discussed. Obviously, no one is opposed to MSK and the work you are doing. What I'm opposed to is this enormous business-driven real estate grab, which seems to be as much about stunning views of Manhattan from the patient rooms as it is about cancer. This massive project would not be serving the needs of the community nearly as much as it would be serving the MSK's ambitions. It's shocking to see how much advertising competing hospitals on the east side are doing. MSK's giant billboard at York and 61st Street is absurdly inappropriate. I can't help but wonder how MSK, which pays no taxes and is supposed to be a not-for-profit, is going to mark its tower with stellar Manhattan views in a community that is in desperate need of affordable housing. It is my prayer that city officials serving the Upper East Side make fair and balanced decisions that lead to the highest good for all concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kathleen.
Thank you, Laura.
Kathleen Steed. I've been also at all the meetings. I don't have prepared remarks. After the last meeting, I was had been sort of upset. I keep hearing about laundry, traffic, just disruptions, etc. And I think, okay, at one point when I heard cancer statistics, it wasn't about me, but unfortunately, yes, I do have cancer and have been treated for that. It appears that none of the people who've been speaking maybe don't yet have cancer. You will have cancer. Somebody in your family will have cancer. Somebody in your friends will have cancer. It's not just an inconvenient few years. It's life or death. I'm in a cancer support group, and one of the people there is dying. So it's just like not in my backyard. I got very angry thinking, okay, everything is fine, good place, but not here, somewhere else that we won't be bothered from our expensive apartment buildings. Anyway, I'm glad that Memorial Sloan Kettering is there. I very much hope that the new place will be built. If my cancer reoccurs, if somebody else near me, I would like to be able to be treated before the worst happens and that I can no longer be treated. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Next, we have Karen Giordano.
Hi, my name is Karen Giordano, and my home is on 63rd Street between York and First for the last 40 years. There's been an online petition created by people of our community. I'd like to read it, and just a few of the comments by people who have signed it. We, the residents, students, and workers of the Upper East Side of Manhattan and other concerned citizens feel that any rezoning or variances to accommodate Memorial Sloan Kettering MSK building, what would be the tallest hospital in the world, 594 feet, in a densely populated residential neighborhood with serious traffic and parking issues on a fragile power grid, on a block with a public elementary school and 60 feet apartment buildings would be gravely irresponsible on the part of any city or state official, elected, appointed, or otherwise. We are calling on Anthony Cohen, Felice Farber, and all other members of the Community Board 8, Julie Menon, and all other city council members, Mark Levine, Manhattan Borough President, Liz Kruger, New York State Senator, Rebecca Seawright, New York State Assembly Member, Eric Adams, New York City Mayor, Kathy Hochul, New York State Governor, and the City Planning Commission, Department of Transportation, Department of Education, Department of Environmental Protection to reject any and all rezoning variances and changes of footprint at 431-435 66th Street, 432-336 67th Street, and 1231-1241 York Avenue. So this proposed tower runs counter to everything City of Yes for carbon neutrality is trying to accomplish. Once built, it cannot be undone. All we are asking for is balance and quality of life for all on the Upper East Side. There's just a few comments of the people who signed this that I'd like to read. The MSK tower proposal is massive and out of proportion for a largely residential neighborhood. It would create gridlock, congestion, and noise to the streets. No variances should be granted. The footprint should remain the same. Frederica Miller. No, do not build a building of this scale intruding upon a residential side street with a school and church on it. Our neighborhood is already starved of sunlight and open space, and a building of this scale would further reduce quality of life for the 5-story home it would loom over, Yasima Palumbo. The environment cannot support this rezoning. It will be a deterrent to the well-being of those currently living in the neighborhood. Maurice Hausner, please preserve the unique and diverse blend of residential, schools, shops, and churches that make up the Upper East Side and do not allow the hospital to take over the expressive space. Lisa Barnhart, the blood center expansion upward, Lenox Hills floated plan, the mammoth facility going up on 79th and 1st, a proposed structure on 92nd. Shall we say there's more than enough reaching for the sky in our neighborhood? Sarah Gallagher. No to rezoning, variances and changes of footprint. A building of this massive scale will negatively affect residents in this neighborhood in many ways. Angie Ho. This is so unnecessary to have such a residential area. Soon the Upper East Side will be just hospitals, not to mention MSK recently laid off hundreds of employees, yet they have millions to build this. It makes no sense. Kateria Klinbowski. As a lifelong resident of 66th Street, I have lived through every demolition and construction project that MSK has undertaken on the block since they began building east of PS 183. A massive tower of this size will drastically affect the quality of life for everyone in the area during the several years it will take to complete the project and long after. The building size should be scaled back, or more suitable locations should be considered. Mary Jarrah. Traffic on York is already a nightmare, which spews into traffic on First Avenue. Getting onto the FDR is horrible at any day. This cannot be built. Anonymous. Another steal of our streets and neighborhoods for big corporations that feel they should be above the law. Jill McManus. Please be aware, they are currently erecting another school on 65th Street between York and First Avenue in the former parking garage enterprise building. And lastly, we already have so many hospitals serving the community. This is something our neighborhood does not need. An option would be to build on one of MSK's existing buildings at a greatly reduced height to avoid further density issues and increased pollution. Gary Zaremba. And, lastly, I would say, I understand the concerns of what you're trying to do here, but as an average New Yorker, my coverage wouldn't even cover me to go to your hospital. So, maybe people are coming in from other states or something, but between the housing crises, the unaffordable living, and the unaffordable healthcare, I think that to keep our environment healthy is a much more important goal to reach for us whose home is in this area. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Karen. Next, we have Bruce. And if you could identify yourself and tell us where you're from once you are unmuted. There you go.
Hello. I'm Bruce. I am a resident on York Avenue, and I kind of have accepted that this hospital will be built as a foregone conclusion, but I'm just horrified at the prospect of another structure like the Coke building on 68th Street, which is a soulless glass box that comes right up to the sidewalk. Right now, the apartment building on 66 is recessed, and there are flowers. There's a flowering cherry blossom tree, I believe, on the corner of 67th. And all of us residents in the neighborhood, as well as your own employees, enjoy this greenery. And I know that there was talk of some kind of landscaping provision, and that's what I'm really hoping somehow survives this whole design process, because we do not need another several hundred foot tall glass box that is as cold and sterile and uninviting for a residential neighborhood such as ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Next, we have, Catherine Anderson. And then I believe we can move on to committee members.
My remarks are brief. The tallest hospital building in the world does not need to be foisted off onto a block of mostly rent-stabilized and affordable apartments housing average New Yorkers, many of whom work in the neighborhood, in buildings a tenth of the size of the proposed hospital. Naturally, these plans would not go forward on a wealthier block.
Thank you. I'm not sure if that's true, but I understand your concern. Russell, I think we can start with Russell.
Thank you. So first of all, I just want to thank Memorial Sloan Kettering for participating in this task force and as many meetings as you have, and providing as much information as you've provided and answering the questions that you've answered. I think the first question here is, you've listened to the whereas clauses that we talked about. I think if there's anything in there that's incorrect, please let us know so that we can correct it. There were some questions that we had in putting it together, one of which was, I think you had mentioned that you were going to use union labor for the project, and we weren't sure if you had already said that you were committed to using union labor in the offsite fabricating, or if that was something that we were sort of independently requesting. So I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Want to answer right now? Yeah, thank you, Russell. And just to clarify that, yes, we are committed to union labor on site as well as off site. Okay. MSK has a long-standing history with union labor for all of our major capital projects, and that will continue in the future.
Thank you. And then another question that we had, I believe you had committed to working with PS 183 on mitigation issues. I just want to make sure that's right, because I think we were putting that in the resolution. Sounds like that's a yes.
That's correct.
And then similarly, I think you committed to monthly meetings with the community, regarding sort of construction progress, that kind of thing, so that, you can hear concerns and feedback and keep everybody apprised of kind of what's coming.
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll make sure that we incorporate that also. So then I think that those are the questions that I had, and then just returning to the, the resolution. I think as drafted, it's good. I think, frankly, I am convinced that cancer rates are going to go up. So I do, believe that there's a need for increased treatment and increased space to treat people. And I think, frankly, it's a benefit to have that in our neighborhood. And, in terms of the resolution and the sort of recommendations that we're making, the one substantive result provision that I'm sort of least wedded to, I would say, is the one about the envelope and the footprint. And the reason is that, I'm sort of sensitive to the fact that, if the air rights and the additional FAR, if it's not used on this project, it can be used elsewhere. And it seems to me that, better to use it on a hospital than on something else. And I certainly take the community's concerns about, what's being built here, but I think the fact that it is being built on, a site that MSK already owns and that's already being used for sort of hospital-related purposes, it alleviates the concerns that I would have about that. So that's sort of my view on the resolution and what we should do, and others can sort of discuss what they think of the draft.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Next, we have Marco.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, MSK, to coming in front of the community and to try to convince us what you are planning to do. I think you did your best, but I think not enough. And let me be very clear. Nobody is in disagreement that the whole community needs this type of facility within the city. What we are saying is the vital service within the city and not in one place. That's the only thing we're saying. You're right with your statistics, with everything. Absolutely right. I found it, even that there is no motion, I found this motion or this draft too premature because the applicant didn't show the full proposal, especially the facades. There are four A, B, C, and D actions on the point 3 that were not answered by the applicant. Let me go, especially, most of them I don't have no problem. Just let me go for the zoning resolution 7921 and 7943. The 7921, quote, provided that the reduction does not exceed 15% of the required by the section 2371, may authorize the location of buildings without regard to front yard or height or setbacks regulations, which would otherwise apply along portions of the streets wholly within the large-scale community facility development, and further may authorize the location of community facility buildings without regard to side or rear yards regulations, which would otherwise apply along portions of lot lines abutting other zoning lots within the large-scale community facility development. As a condition of granting such authorization, in each case, the commissioner shall make the following especially findings. I'm not going to read all of them, but I'm going to go directly to the number C. Quote, that such a distribution or location will not affect adversely any zoning lot outside of the large facility community development by restricting access to light and air, or by creating traffic congestions. We have been witnessing the outcry of the community about traffic and no answer from the applicant. We need an environmental impact report to make a reasonable decision. So let's go for the other resolution 7943. This was created specifically for the community board number 8, number 12 too, but number 8, that's specifically in the whole city, and said, quote, that contained the community facilities specified in section 7364. The city planning commission may, by a special permit or permit modification of the regulations relating to height and setback of the periphery of the large-scale community development, courts, and distance between windows, walls, and lot lines, or otherwise allowed in section 7921. As a condition for such an action, the commission shall find that such a modification, I'm not going to read the other ones, I'm going to go directly to the number E, will not adversely affect any other zoning lots or streets outside the large-scale community facility development, will not adversely affect any other zoning lot or streets outside of the large community facility development by unduly restricting access to light and air. Consequently, the applicant has been saying that the facades are not finished to show us. You know Anthony very well. That's not true. Therefore, it's premature any resolution. Just only let me make one more point. about the saying no carbon neutrality, we can reach carbon neutrality possible as proposed by MSK. That means that MSK is the new definition of the building code. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I think the purpose of this task force resolution is not to say we love the project, we hate the project, and certainly we will be responding to the application as it gets to the Euler process. What we are hoping to do is, in fact, to influence the nature and perhaps some of the detail of the project by expressing our concerns before the project is in fact complete. And so I think this I think it's important that we kind of gather our thoughts, and the best way to gather our thoughts, in fact, is to have a resolution describing them that is not a board resolution on the Euler, but a resolution relative to this MSK presentation. In fact, a summing up of the task force. So I do think it's completely appropriate.
Respectfully, Anthony, I had to be in disagreement, but the issue right here is they has been presented on the issue. The community has been speaking. Right now, he just spoke exactly the same issue that I just said. What I'm saying is very simple. Let's go keep working. Let's go have the Euler process. In the Euler process, yes, we must have a position at that time. Let the applicant work it out the facade. Let the applicant come with numbers. Let the applicant discuss about the solutions of the traffic. Because there are two major issues right here. It's traffic and the quality of air and the height of the building. That's it. The rest is pretty much, look, I will support the rest of the project. I do not have a problem. The only problem is that this element that I just described, which basically is coincidental with the community's point of view. And thank you so much. And I appreciate that you give me a second opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Okay, next we have Adam. Who's now?
Thank you, MSK team. I was paying attention to your presentation, and I think you left out the slide where you announced you were acquiring a development site to build housing that we so desperately needed in the neighborhood. Maybe you left that slide out. Hoping you'll add it in at some point. But to correct some of the text in the report or in the draft resolution, I'm referencing the May 18th MSK presentation. They cited 355 housing units are in 1233 York. And my note taking was that they were intending to fill 86 vacancies within the portfolio, the Upper East Side, with some of those being displaced, and 200 odd for Roosevelt Island. So there was a delta of 355 minus 86 minus 200. So there was a delta of around 70 or so housing units that were not being replaced. I would argue that the 86 itself is not a replacement. You're backfilling homes that you were holding vacant. So again, I think special attention needs to be paid to this in the Euler.
Yeah, Adam, I agree with you on the numbers, except that I also saw 308 at one point and 320 at another.
355 is from their presentation, May 18th.
Okay.
Slide 17 from the May 18th presentation.
Okay. Well, that's what we'll use.
Okay.
Thank you, Adam. Michelle.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, MSK. Really appreciate your being here and you're being so forthcoming. Let me just comment on some of the wording on the resolution, just in the order in which I see it. The first replacement, when you talked about replacing 300 units of housing with at least 200 in Community District 8, it sounds as though you're not counting Roosevelt Island, which I think you meant not to count Roosevelt Island, that you would like it on the Manhattan side. But when you word it by saying in Community Board 8, Roosevelt Island is in Community Board 8. So I'm not sure what your intent was when you were writing this, if that's an error, or at any rate, it needs some clarification. Do you see what I'm saying? Anthony,
yeah.
Felice?
Yeah, no, so I have a question for you. So, so to Adam's point before, replacing 300 units, 355 units of housing, with the delta of, I guess the question is, are we adding the 70 and the 86 as replacement housing that should be built, or 70 new? Like, I'd like your thoughts on how to phrase that.
Are you talking to me or MSK?
You and Adam, actually.
Oh, well, I just want to say, I wasn't really referring to the numbers. Adam has the numbers. I'm assuming they're correct. He took them from the presentation. I'm only saying that the implication was that you wanted the housing built on the Manhattan side. But the way the wording is, it says that you want it in Community District 8, and that includes Roosevelt Island. I may be wrong, but I don't think that was the intent of your comment. Maybe it was, but if you meant to say that you wanted it in Manhattan, then you have to correct the wording in that part of the resolution. The other thing is going to the 5th bullet down about union labor being used for off-site fabrication. I think that's fine if MSK is choosing to do that. But I think it was Marco who raised the concern at our last meeting that demanding that has the possibility of delaying the project, because it may just be a longer process to find union factories or workers or whatever for off-site fabrication. And to the extent that this project is 6 years, I think that this is a give that we can do if there was any possibility in it. I won't say shorten the length of the project, but not add to the length of the project. So I just mentioned that again for your consideration. The other one was where you say MSK implement the highest levels of noise mitigation, dust control during construction, and as they propose. I would like to also add and pest control to that, which I know they're very mindful of, and I know they do have a plan for it, but I think it probably should be in our comments. And in terms of just wording of the resolution, oh, and you have it in the whereas also. So the very last whereas you would have to take, if you agree, you know, the union labor comment off the fabrication. Now, going to the heart of this, which is the height and bulk of the building. Number one, what is the height? Oh, let me make one last point. I'm sorry. We're calling for monthly meetings during the construction phase. While that sounds like it would be wonderful, MSK is agreeing to it. Frankly, in a 6-year-long project, month to month is probably too frequent, but I guess we could have it in the resolution and change it as needed down the line, but that's probably a little too much. How high, excuse me, what is the height of the main MSK building? Shelley or whoever.
Fine. We're working on that, Michelle. We're working on that.
Oh, okay. Of the existing building, I'm saying.
While they're looking at that up, I just want to add one comment about the offsite fabrication. It's not referring to like a manufacturing facility. It's when you assemble like the electrical parts that will go into a building, that you'll assemble it off-site somewhere as a way of streamlining construction. And the comment is that when you're doing it off-site, you're doing it with union labor.
Yeah, well, this says fabrication specifically, so we may be talking about two different things. But Eric, did you find the height of the building?
It's just not on any of the slides we have with us, Michelle, but we will. We're gonna get. We will email the architect now.
Okay, I would like to know that, because let me say this. Look, we obviously have always valued your presence in the neighborhood. We continue to value. We value your work. We take your statistics as on face value, that you have done your research. No issue with any of that, and I know you recognize that. The issue is the height and bulk, and whether or not you can satisfy all of your needs with a lesser height and lesser bulk. That is the question. The word cancer is probably the most terrifying word in the English language, if not in all languages. So to talk about it is to me is almost irreverent. It's so disturbing. And the consequences that it has in people's lives can bring me to tears. So I give you that. And it is very difficult, as you know, to discuss this without having that word in your head. So we are not asking you to diminish care, to forsake any of your responsibilities, duties, or your mission. We are only asking you in this resolution, and I know that you have plan B, plan whatever, to please go back and just take a look at how you can possibly reduce this bulk and this height. This is the equivalent of a 60-story. If we talk about the traditional 10-story per floor when you're talking about residential, you're so that the mind's eye for people who are not so accustomed to thinking in feet, this is the equivalent of a 60-story building. It's enormous. The footprint is enormous. York Avenue, side streets will be absolutely dwarfed in its presence. It is overwhelming. And so I know you hear what we're saying, and you know that we're going to the heart of the height and bulk only. And we're asking you to take that into consideration as you go forward. That's all I'll say at this point. Thanks very much for your being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. While you were speaking, MSK, and this is Wikipedia, so heaven only knows if it's right, but Tower A is listed in Wikipedia at 447 feet high, your Tower A. And then the only other one that made the top 20 something.
We're just trying to make sure that we don't give out any incorrect information.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that Tower A is listed at 447. Another way to just illuminate Michelle's point is that if the 600-foot building were somehow built horizontally, it would be 3 city blocks long. Yeah, 600 feet, 3 city blocks. Marco, don't shake your head. It's true.
Yeah, Anthony, that Tower A, what's the location of Tower A?
I don't know. I just said, I just read it off a list.
Well, if it's called Tower A, is that universal language for Sloan Kettering? Does Tower A?
No, it's part of Sloan Kettering. Yes.
No, I'm asking the team though. I'm asking the team that as it refers to Tower A, if that's within their language, where is Tower A? They can probably.
That's referring to our research building that's on 68th Street. And that is the tower section. And then there's a B section of that building. They have a higher and a lower portion of that building. So that's the reason why that nomenclature is there.
Okay.
That is the Zuckerman Lab building between 68th and 69th.
Okay. So Anthony, Wikipedia, what are they called? How big is Tower B? Now that we have
it's not listed here. It was literally just
that.
Okay. I did something dumb. I looked for tallest hospital buildings.
Okay. All right. Whatever.
No, it's not a.
You said you'd get it to us, so we'll wait.
It's not a secret that it's about 22 stories, and the standard of 15 or 17 feet was not the standard, I believe, when it was built. So if you said 300, you wouldn't be off by a huge amount. And we will get you an exact number, but that's probably in the ballpark.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Michelle. And now we have Barbara Rudder.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry to say it, but I do have a personal thank you. And I have a relative that's visiting from California because the wonderful hospitals in California was not able to do what you're able to do. So we all are uncomfortable with height, and yet I feel for me, there's a difference between what you are providing and what a regular another glass residential building would provide. I just have one other comment and then I have a question. Just to be certain, with Michelle's comment was correct about talking about CB8. However, Roosevelt Island is Manhattan, so we would have to change the wording to indicate Roosevelt Island versus the mainland or west of the river.
So it was intended to include all of Community District 8, which is Roosevelt Island.
So it was correct then. I do have just one question about it. When you said that you need to replace 200 units in CB8, do you mean existing buildings? I did miss the one meeting, so I'm not sure. Should it be spelled out that it's new buildings or existing buildings? If it is existing, are we taking away affordable housing from non-MSK people? Where is the replacement of the going to be?
So it was a request to build additional new housing.
So, okay, I think that should be spelled out in the whereas. I don't think it says new housing, it just was replacement. And that
I think those two clauses need to be clarified.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. And we will do that. And we now have Elizabeth Ashby.
Yes, I have just one question. This is resolved of putting the following these suggestions in their application. This is not for or against building the building. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And then I have a suggestion, and I appreciate Memorial Sloan Kettering's application and all of their efforts, but being involved in land use for so many years and seeing so many buildings built, I'm going to ask that you add another recommendation, which is probably quite easy in the hospital because you have a easy tell, but you have a emergency phone number that you paste up on your site for people to call when something goes, because 5 years of construction, I cannot believe it won't happen that as it happens most places, some workman is going to do something that humiliates you. And I think that if you have an emergency number that people can call, I think that's a very good idea. And I hope that we could put that suggestion in the resolution. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. I have a couple of things that I think as we've been listening, I think we can, and Felice will discuss this later, but I think we should, we could talk more explicitly about the traffic issues, and a sort of, I don't think anyone who has attended these meetings or who has tried to get on the FDR Drive going down York is convinced that this scheme will work. And I think that we could be more forceful is the wrong word, more explicit. And we can discuss this later, but I think we could be more explicit on traffic. I don't think we really talked about in the resolution, as it turns out, I don't think we talked about the effects of shadows throughout the neighborhood. I think Shelley certainly made the good point at one of the meetings that the PS 183 playground is in shadow from the research building next door, and the tower will only have a longer shadow, but it certainly won't have it certainly won't create a greater shadow. And I think we've talked about scale, and again, I think we could be slightly more explicit about that. And we've already mentioned the housing, and I think Elizabeth's suggestion that we mention that we make a proposal that MSK provides and displays prominently that emergency number that isn't 311, because we all know that 311 is frequently overcrowded. And the one other comment, which has to do with the hospital with the pavilion's location, is that in our whereases, we might comment on the current large number of medical institutions in community board aid and the large amount of real estate that is devoted to hospitals in community board aid, just as a kind of, there are lots of them here, just as a comment. Anyway, that was, aside from that, and I noticed a couple of typos, we'll catch those.
So we have, and we'll take it with a little grain of salt, but 305 is the best information we have on the height of Memorial Hospital.
Oh, okay.
304 and change, but 305 feet would be even better than the original estimate of around 300.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, terrific. Any other board members wishing to speak? I see none.
So let me
yeah.
run through the changes that we're going to make to this. I guess the question is whether we're going to take a vote on it tonight. So we're going to add the zoning action for curb cuts. Language was in the presentation tonight. We're going to clarify the whereas about housing and additional and our requirement of replacement housing. We're going to clarify that. Anthony requested that we add a comment on the number of hospitals in the district. We'll try to be a little more explicit about the size and scale of the building. Add pest control to this as well. We'll add an emergency phone number, not 311. We'll add something about traffic issues and a comment about the effects of shadows. And those were the suggestions tonight that we'll clarify in the resolution. One question for you, Shelley. Do you need a comment or a resolution on the revocable consent as a separate item? And is normally, as you've brought up before, a transportation committee issue? Does that get brought up separately?
Thanks for the question, Teresa. It's ever present on our minds. We are hung up in a procedural glitch because DOT cannot make progress on its portion of the revocable consent application without hearing from all of the parties to which it distributed comments in March and asked for comments. It's my understanding that your statement that you have seen the proposal and that you will reserve final comments for the ULIP application on its design, but that are generally supportive of the need for the bridge would be sufficient for DOT to get itself out of the glitch it's in. And what that means to everybody here is that when we come back to you in ULIP, the bridge will be, instead of a trailing subsequent application, it'll be all in one application within the ULIP, and it can be considered by the board at that time in its, holistically as part of the project instead of a separate item.
So including it as we have here is sufficient? I guess I wasn't sure. Or you want it as a separate standalone?
I would like to take a look at that or have an offline discussion with you and hear that language again. But the effort is appreciated and the concept is something that we would like to see in the resolution. The conceptual advice regarding any conceptual advice you have regarding the bridge would be welcome in the resolution from our standpoint.
Okay. So I guess, Russell, is it appropriate to take a vote on the proposed resolution with the comments that we have received?
Sorry, on the proposed resolution with the, I mean, I think if we incorporate all the comments as friendly amendments, then we certainly can.
Okay, I see that Marco wants to.
Marco's hand, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Phyllis. First of all, let's go comment about Anthony. Anthony, what you're saying is you need 3 blocks of 300, but you are thinking that is 1-story building. Come on, Anthony, well, you know very well. Come on. Now, if you divide 250.
No. That isn't what I was saying. If you took the building and lay it down on its side, it would be 3 city blocks long.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the second point is my perception is still premature that, and I'm going to abstain if this is a motion, and the motion never was put on place, but I don't want to go inside of parliament procedure, but it should be at the beginning, before to speak the motion, it should be somebody is the motion to approve, that they're gonna do right away. After that, I'm going to speak. So the issue right here is, my point of view is in that resolution, I don't see only one part, the problem of traffic, and that is the major concern for me. And for that, I will abstain. Thank you.
And thank you for the correction on parliamentary procedure.
Okay, Judy,
I make a motion to approve the resolution.
thank you. Is there a second? Barbara Rudder is waving her hand physically, although she has her metaphoric hand. Mrs. Brown has a thumb up. So I guess we have, it has been voted, it has been moved and seconded. And Michelle has her hand up right now.
Thank you. Can we put in the resolution that we have not thoroughly studied the traffic situation, and this is with the understanding that a lot more clarification and mitigation will be proposed later? I think that should be specifically mentioned. And also, as the introduction to the resolution, to specify exactly what you said it was, Anthony, so there's no misunderstanding as to what we're voting on here, but that it says that this is a resolution as an outgrowth of the task force, not to be confused to any comments or resolution that will come following further presentations and the URLA process. In other words, spell it all out. So going down the pike, there's no confusion here as to what we were voting on.
That's a good point, Michelle. And I think a good way to say it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now Russell.
Yeah, just to add to Michelle's point, I mean, it's still going to be voted on by the full board, but you're correct that that's separate from ULURP, and that's still coming. We can clarify that.
Okay. And Marco.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm going to call the question.
Thank you, Marco. Is there, and Barbara
anybody can
seconding?
second? Okay.
Yes, Barbara and Michelle. All right, the question has been called. Does anyone object to the calling of the question? I think insufficient hands. So if we could do those who were, let's see, how are we going to do this? Those who are eligible to vote through their participation in at least 2 of the 4 previous meetings. If any of those are opposed, raise their hands. Opposed, abstaining, or not voting for cause, raise your hands. And if, all right, we've got Barbara Rudder.
I thought I had lowered my hand. No, I'm very much for this.
Oh, okay. Marco?
Thank you. Abstain.
Okay, we have Marco abstaining. And are there any, I see no other hands. So the motion carries, and we will, oops, Michelle.
Yeah, no, the vote is finished. The motion carries. That's great. I'll only request that before the full board meeting, can you circulate among those of us?
Yes,
To vote with all the additional stuff, so that if anything got lost, we could correct it before it goes to the full board.
No problem.
Okay.
And just to read out who's here and voting. So it is Adam, Barbara Rutter, Elizabeth Ashby, John McClement, Judy Schneider, Marco Tamayo abstained, Michelle Birnbaum, Mrs. Brown, and Russell. Did I miss anyone?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you, Felice. And thank you very much. I think that unless there is some pressing, urgent business for this particular task force, I would like to thank MSK. You have, I think at the end of the day, this has been a wonderful process and is a model that I wish all developments would follow, all applicants would follow. So thanks a lot, guys. And Elizabeth has her hand raised.
Move to adjourn.
Marco and Barbara have seconded, and I think no one objects. So thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.